Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Future Tech podcast series. It's me, Charlie Sell, the Group MD of Arrows Group, where I interview thought leaders, chief of staff, chief people officers, CTOs of technical businesses, asking them a bit about their story, things that are passionate to them, relevant to our STEM listeners, and also some career advice. So really pleased to have Salma de Graaf with me today. Salma is the Chief People Officer of Travix. Travix is a global online travel agent. Their brand names will be a lot more well known to you guys than Travix as the company. And we'll go into that a little bit with a part of the podcast, as they really are quite an inspiring company and one that I've known now for probably over 7 years. So know quite intimately in regards to their investment into international culture, diversity, inclusion, as well as the technology that they invest in. So hi, Salma. Really pleased to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks very much, Charlie. Good to be here. You can
Great.
see I've got my puppy in my hands at the moment, so I'm a little bit hands full.
We were literally just saying that, weren't we? How life of lockdown is, if it's not kids, it's puppies, and if it's not puppies, it's something going on in the house. But we've all evolved and adapted, I guess.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, I can say, but you're getting used to it every day.
That's it. So let's jump straight in and ask you a bit about your story, how you actually got into being the Chief People Officer and moved into working for tech businesses.
Yeah, well, it's maybe an unusual route into a career, although everybody has their story, of course. I was actually a maths graduate by bachelor's. And so my early days were, you come out of university, as I did, with a maths degree, and it felt like either teaching or accounting. So I started out as an accountant, which ended up not being for me. So that wasn't a personality match or click for me. And what I was doing there for those guys was also selling their services to new clients. And it turned out I was much better at sales. So I moved from accounting to a first brewery. And in those days, it was Bass Brewery, selling beer on the phone. Turned out really good at sales. And so took a fast track promotion through sales, ending managing large sales teams in the telesales environment. And there you're doing then a lot of training, a lot of recruitment. So I moved from that brewery to another one called Scottish in Newcastle. And for those of you in the UK, you probably have enjoyed their brands like Strongbow and Carling and that's not the right word, Strongbow and Foster's. Sorry, Carling was from Bass Brewers days. And then I was training again, salespeople, working for the big supermarkets. And from there, you're doing a lot of coaching, a lot of one-to-one. And so I ended up, the company I was working for introduced a sort of a HR business partner model. And I ended up moving into one of their HR business partner roles and pursuing my master's in HR and doing my chartered professional exams. And Heineken brought that brewery at that time. And Heineken, as I'm sure you're much bigger brand, 80,000 employees in those days across many countries. And they had a project in their head office, which was HR commercial based. So they were looking for somebody with a sales background and a HR background. So they took me on my first international assignment over to the Netherlands. And from there, I worked for the brewery across a number of countries: South America, Suriname, in Africa, in Ethiopia. And then having one child and picked up a Dutch husband on my travels later, was after about nearly 20 years in the brewing industry, was looking to settle in a country and not be an expat anymore, and then also looking for an industry change. And so I was very targeted on what I wanted, and I really was looking for tech companies, and that's how I found Travix as a tech company. Whilst it's an OTA, an online travel agent, so you might think of it as a travel organization, because it's online, it really feels more like an e-commerce organization. And then the culture match has just been a click from the start. I think, people talk about fast-paced and dynamic, and I think any company that you work in, you feel like it's fast-paced and dynamic until you're actually in a really volatile industry like travel. You're such at the whim of anything happening in the world, whether it's exploding volcanoes or earthquakes or weather fronts or new airlines or pandemics, or there's so much that can impact your customers, and whether that's the customers sitting on the planes or the airlines themselves. And so it's been quite a journey, and that's how I ended up in HR and tech.
Yeah, wow. And what I loved about that is one of the things that I talk a lot to STEM graduates about is don't be afraid to change either. There's no longer a career for life, unlike our parents' generation. And I think you're living proof of that, where you started in accounting, moved into selling beer, evolved into HR sales, and then moved into tech. And I imagine throughout that journey, every skill that you've learned, you've been able to then transform it or take it through to where you want your path to go.
Yeah, I mean, you have to think, like, HR business partner was just not even a thing then when I was at university. It wasn't, well, maybe it was, I don't know, but it wasn't a topic I'd ever heard of. It wasn't a popular field. And I think, I'm in maybe a more traditional function, whereas if you're in technology or data or things, that the movement of those job roles, the types of work, the possibilities that technology gives to those positions means that you need to be flexible, because likelihood of you doing a job in 10 years that you've never heard of is very high. So, it's both finding the possibility, being open to where your skills, it's also about where your skills lie, and that combination of hard work. I think my husband and I talk about that quite a lot, because he's also in STEM. He's a data analyst. And how would I say this? Like, IQ wise, probably much higher IQ. And things at school and university came very easily. And then that means that perhaps that sort of fight or the hard working piece doesn't really get developed through your academia if you're really naturally brilliant. And I think a lot of graduates that you meet, especially in STEM, naturally high IQ people, and really academic, very much looking for the where did this come from, how is it researched, what's the data sources, and I think that sort of tenacity or flexibility for being open to change or wanting to explore and see where roles can take you can be an undervalued skill, actually.
Yeah, and that's a really, really good way of putting it, where you are so right in technology, and especially within data and the more scientific parts of technology, the IQ and levels of intelligence are what people thrive and have done very well within the universities and school. Being able to find a company and show that you can change, evolve, develop, that's a skill that as early as you can start developing that, the better, really, isn't it? It's something that we all look for.
It's difficult because our education system doesn't encourage it. So you're really rewarded for your ability to understand and know and follow logic processes. So the entire education process in that sense is really rewarding that behavior. And then on top of that, when you come into the working environment, it's not only that, but then and on top of that, you're either looking for people skills, the EQ element. Typically, as you get promoted, that often can include ending up with managerial responsibility. And those don't tend to go hand in hand, or certainly haven't been part of what's being rewarded throughout that education process and system.
Yeah, that's a really valid point. And moving on, thinking about one of the things I've always loved about Travix, and as I said, knowing the company for as long as I have, is the genuine international culture. And it's probably no surprise that's why the headquarters are in Amsterdam, which is one of the most international cities in Europe, if not the world. So when you're thinking about the teams and the culture, and when you're bringing on people from super intelligent backgrounds all the way through to the people working probably in support and even the guys and girls in many of the other divisions. What are the advantages and what are the challenges of building an international business and the people aspect that you've experienced?
Yeah, it's a good question, Charlie. It's we are genuinely international. And what do I mean by that? You know, we have about 55 nationalities, even if you just focus that on our employees in the Netherlands, which is approximately 200, to have 55 nationalities of those 200 just genuinely shows to what extent we are truly international. The benefits, of course, is that, you know, our customers, we're flights, so you're dealing with customers from all over the world. So our employee mix genuinely has a reflection about our customer mix. Often some of the technology skills that we're also getting are skills that people have learned themselves, and perhaps not even through a formal education process, but are people that have been coding since they were 10, 13, developing small programs and then practicing that. And so they're quite tricky skills to find, actually, people that have a genuine passion, and that's what we're looking for all the time. So the diversity, like actively seeking for people and then broadening out your horizons, the Netherlands allows us to do that because it allows us to bring in skilled workers. And we need that possibility to do it. The downside of it is, you can hear from my voice that I'm from the UK and Birmingham specifically, if anybody's from there. And English, therefore, is my first language and native language. And one of the things that you underestimate or presume is that perhaps English is a second language. Well, it's often for our employees a third or fourth language, actually. So, you know, making communication simple, that it's communication is to be understood and to share ideas and to go backwards and forwards. It's not about grammar, fancy words. And that's a bit of a shift, you know, in terms of the way that our expectations are. Like I said, we're very fast. So you need to be able to put your ideas down correctly, succinctly, in a clear way, but it doesn't need to be beautiful, you know. So those formatting, the things that you can expect in large organizations which spend a lot of time doing, that's not important. What's important is it the correct idea? Is it sound? Is it business sense? Can it be understood? The other side of it is that you end up with pockets. So let's say if a technology team, it's almost like the world. You'll have like pockets of teams that are from Brazil or Turkey or Spain or Spanish speaking, not even from Spain, but Spanish speaking or French speaking. And then they create small internal communities too. And at Travix, we sort of ended up, we bring specialists in, and they're people that are adventurous, coming from over the world, maybe taking their first assignment. So not only are they joining a great company, but they're finding sort of family. And even when they move on from us, they've often made their first international friends and community with us. And that's a really big plus. But so some of the upsides and downsides are often to do with language and communication, and the sort of pockets of subculture that can create.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, because as a personality type, you have to be someone who genuinely wants to work in an international environment, don't you? To be able to embrace, you know, the few challenges, to then really capitalize on the benefits. I remember.
Yeah.
You know, when I lived in Holland for 7 years, and my friends, my international friends, are still my friends today, and they'll probably be my lifelong friends, even though everyone's moved all around the world again, because you do build those connections with people when you are in a different environment.
And it's such an enriching experience. You know, I didn't take my first international assignment until I was, I think, my early 30s. And then I was thinking, why didn't somebody tell me how brilliant this is? And I should have done it after university or in my 20s. But it also means that you'll have experiences that perhaps some of your home family and friends don't share. And it's difficult to articulate sometimes what's challenging about moving away and then also coming home. I think it's
Yeah.
also challenging when I come home, and you can see I still speak about home, England as being
Yeah.
home,
Yeah.
but coming home and then you know, the things I appreciate so much is around safety and education and healthcare. And a lot of people where I'm from are from very, you know, privileged backgrounds and taking those things for granted. And then you're like, well, it's not a for granted, you know, these are the important things in life.
Yeah, yeah, and again, when you learn that by meeting people from different countries who give you first-hand
Yeah.
education about how they've been brought up or the world that they've come from, the level of humility goes to another level, doesn't it? And the level of
Yeah.
understanding, I guess.
I think it's the level of understanding, you
Yeah.
know, to how much empathy you can have, and really feeling that the people that you meet, you know, I've got a daughter, she's 7, and we, you know, we talk about things. We went to Paris last year, and there was we passed somebody living on the street, and just talking about, you know, how is it that people can be in that situation and feeling that it can be a step away from everybody. And so to really appreciate what it is that your education can bring, so you know what opportunities they can allow you, to what extent it's important to take care of yourself emotionally, physically, health, you know, look after your body,
Yeah.
do eat well, exercise, you know. And like I say, it all sounds very, yeah, sure, whatever. But you know, you see people like that, and it's not because, I think in the most majority of cases, that something extreme happened. It's a set of continuous circumstances that would have worked against.
Yeah.
And so it's, you know, really when you get to meet people from all around the world and get to live in other countries, it's been something I've loved and enjoyed doing and wish I'd done earlier. Somebody has
Yeah.
encouraged me to do earlier.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I just couldn't agree with you more. So moving on to our last part of the podcast, which is our career advice for our STEM listeners, and obviously Travix being, you know, one of the most highly regarded employers in Amsterdam, and you've recruited across all levels from graduates and interns all the way through to senior level roles. When you've been looking at the graduate intakes, what's the 1 or 2 pieces of advice you can give our listeners on how they could maybe stand out or get really, stand out, I guess, when looking to wanting to join a business like Travix?
So there's a couple of things that are easy to do. And one is genuinely being interested in the companies that you're applying for. So it's not that, you know, somebody says, why are you applying for this company, that you have to be, you know, yes, this is the only job I want, but just being interested in what is it that organization does. And you can tell immediately when you're interviewing somebody if they've taken even 10 minutes, half an hour to do some Google research and look up either yourself on LinkedIn or the company, or both. Both is, you know, be interested in the people that you're meeting and the organization that you're working for. And then the second part of it is really about that sort of leaning in and engagement. So not how can I say this? So I think I sort of mentioned it at the beginning, that the sort of intellectual credibility that you're coming with, that's there and that's on your CV, but it's not going to be the only thing that pushes you across the bar. So you've also got to show interest, ask questions, and it's not about being an extrovert. So what I'm not sort of saying is you've got to be something that you're not. It's not about charisma, it's more about genuine curiosity and interest, showing that you are up for that flexibility and change. Because a job description, you know, you put out a job description, of course, to hire against, but as I mentioned, our roles change so frequently that very rarely do your job descriptions feel like they're an exact match for the environment and the experience. And of course it should be a fairly close match, but it's looking for people that are open to change, to challenge, put themselves forward. And that's in a way that you can only assess that from the questions that they ask you, the engagement that they show in those meetings. So an interview is really an opportunity for us as a company to sell the company and the job, but for the person to just show a genuine interest, because we appreciate graduates aren't coming with experience. So you're not looking for a CV full of experience. You're looking for a person full of curiosity and full of interest, and that sort of putting their hand up for giving ideas, not sitting on thoughts that could be really critical to the business, but being able to say the thing that's uncomfortable or maybe not wanting to be heard, but using their knowledge and data to put their hand up and say it when we need it.
Yeah. And I think both those points are really, really valid. The showing that natural interest in a company and making sure that you're not coming across as looking at 1,000 companies with now spamming your interest in, and it's more of an academic exercise than it is about. It's better to identify 2 or 3 employers you really like the look of, and you've done the research on the culture, their brand, as much as you can to show that extra level of interest, isn't it? And I couldn't agree with your second point. To ask questions, you don't need to be an extrovert, and you don't need to be false to your natural personality, but to ask questions and to be curious and to show that you're wanting to build a career or at least add value to an employer and get value given back. I think it just goes so far in an interview.
Yeah, exactly. We're not looking for people that want to step into our organization and stay there for 20 years. You're not expecting that type of commitment from people, but you do want, what we do famously is offer really fast international environment, and we offer fast growth. So our employees typically are getting promoted every 12 months. And, therefore you're wanting people that are up for that are ready to put themselves forward. And you can only assess that by the questions that they ask you, by the interaction that you have in that moment.
Yeah. And again, and I can absolutely qualify that, because again, as I mentioned, we've been working together for sort of 7 years, and there's people we placed at engineer levels with Travix only 3 or 4 years ago who are now the leads, the directors, heading up the whole division. So that rapid growth is absolutely genuine within a business like yours. And it's developing people. Continuous development, I think, is a responsibility of both the employee, but the company as well. And if you're both investing in that, you're going to get the best out of each other without your career.
And you're trying to offer a choice to people as well. So like I mentioned, often growth can come with people management, and that's not for everybody. So you're also trying to offer a choice that you can grow as an expert, or you can grow as a manager. And sometimes you need to dip your toe in the water to find out, to what extent do I enjoy coaching and developing and handling all the everyday questions that also come with people management. So and you don't often know it until you've tried it. So we're also trying to offer 2 tracks that cover both expertise and leadership. And often leadership is put out there as the only way to grow your career, and that's not the case.
And again, another really, really good point. So Salma, can you believe that's our podcast coming to an end, another episode, and I could talk to you for hours about, I think we share that love of the international environment, but also how graduates can people showing that natural interest, being inquisitive, and again, your last point being super valid, that it's not just about going into management and leadership roles. You can go into expertise roles as well. So companies that offer people career tracks that not only push them, but also give them a vehicle to perform in their own way, is what it's all about, I guess. And again, as I say, something I've loved about Travix as long as I've known you. So Salma, thank you so much. That's another episode. How did you find it?
You're welcome, Charlie. It's always, nerve-wracking talking and I'm holding the sleeping dog at the time. No. But it's so important to us. It's just, finding the new talent and helping and encourage them take those first steps. You hear how difficult it's been, especially through these last couple of years, with companies having to downsize and therefore the competition for positions. But, the graduates always have a fresh perspective that's interesting. They're coming out with new ideas and without a history and a backlog. And that's so valuable. And they shouldn't underestimate to what extent they're an asset to organizations, and really just go for it, go out there and approach people, approach jobs, approach companies.
Yeah, well, and on that really positive note, again, thank you. And to all our listeners, that's another episode of the Future Tech podcast series. The podcast is on our landing page, arrowspodcasts.com. It's also on the career portals of our 17 university partners and on Spotify, Google, and Apple. So one more time, a thank you to Salma and to everyone listening. Here's another episode, and look forward to speaking to you all next time.
Thank you for listening to Future Tech with Charlie Sell, a podcast from Arrows Group Global. Please subscribe to this podcast so that you never miss an episode. Arrows Group is a global technology recruitment and workforce solutions provider who focus on people at the heart of all our interactions. With in-depth technology expertise and global candidate communities, we offer bespoke solutions to every client and candidate. To find out more, visit arrowsgroup.com.